Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to continue our collaboration series. We had the legend Bob Loukas himself. We've had him on the channel a couple times before, and I think he provides invaluable insights as always. Bob, it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Good to be back.
And I will remind people, if you're not subscribed to Bob or if you don't follow him on Twitter, go ahead and pause the video right now. I will link his social media stuff in the description below and in the pinned comments. So make sure you go follow him on those channels. He posts fairly regularly on both platforms. So, Bob, this market cycle has been interesting. I actually was looking back. I think the last time I had you on my channel, it was back in, I think like August or so
Yeah.
of 2021. And I think, the general expectations at the time were that we could see a pullback in September and then we'd see a continued rally beyond. And we sort of got that. But then at the end, the actual top, I think was, it was actually somewhat tempered
Right.
compared to a lot of expectations. What do you sort of make of that and where we are right now?
Well, I mean, looking back in hindsight, it's quite easy, I guess. I think myself and most people included kind of are looking at past cycles and looking at sort of extensions from either the prior top or the bottom and kind of looking at a six-figure number as a natural kind of place where Bitcoin would top for the cycle. And I think that sort of fooled a lot of us. I think we all knew there'd be diminishing returns from cycle to cycle, but it just didn't really get to the levels we had really all expected. I think there's probably a number of factors looking back, probably the involvement of sort of more institutional players who really aren't in the space for reasons that maybe a lot of your viewers are in the space for.
Mm-hmm.
There was also, I think, a significant turn from Asia and China specifically. So a number of factors. But looking at the charts now from a monthly perspective, it still was a pretty impressive cycle in the end. I think I don't speak for everybody, obviously, but for myself, got caught a little bit short there and market turned. And, it was a matter of how quickly can you then appreciate the cycle had peaked and, what can you do as a result and how quickly can you possibly consolidate some of that and take some gains and prepare for what has been, the bear phase of the cycle, which we're obviously well and truly in and getting, I think, close to an end.
One of the interesting things we've talked a little bit about on my channel, and I think you've also discussed it in your videos, is how from a lot of perspectives, back in April of 2021 was almost like a more technical top.
Yeah.
Do you still agree with that statement? Like, do you sort of look at the 2021 bull market as more so having a more technical top early on, and then something kind of somewhat tempered later in the year?
Yeah, obviously we made a new price high, but when you look at sentiment specifically, and with cycles, sentiment is a very big part of that. Certainly, it does feel as if technically the peak was back there in April of 21, and that was really just sort of the bull trap that got us all excited about possibly going up to that six-figure number and running off in a blow-off top. We didn't really see that blow-off in April 21. It got close, it got very heated, but I feel as if we were kind of a couple of months short and maybe one full extension higher to what would have been more of a traditional or typical kind of blow-off top. But we didn't see that, and I think that's really what put us in a position when we came back up to make a new high to get excited with seeing a blow-off top. And of course, it's been a trap ever since. But yeah, I definitely agree with the sentiment that it's really that April 21 peak that marked the true kind of retail top or peak of the market.
It's an interesting question because one of the things we've seen this cycle is more like longer distribution phases at tops, and then you could argue sort of like longer accumulation phases. Like we had the sort of like the mini accumulation phase back in the summer of 2021.
Yep.
Do you think that is sort of just how it's going to be going forward with Bitcoin, where you don't see the same types of blow off tops that we've seen in the past, and that it'll become more of like a longer distribution phase? or do you think Bitcoin this next cycle will sort of revert back to having those more spectacular blow off tops where you get like one moment in time to capitalize on it and then it's gone?
Yeah, I don't have a particular opinion either way, to be honest with you. I'm actually leaning more towards this next upcoming cycle to being a true kind of like a 90s .com blow off top. I've kind of always thought that, even when this sort of 4-year cycle started back in 18, that we would be looking for a major blow off top that would then follow a pretty significant bear phase, much longer than the one we're currently in, for example. So I don't think we will see a typical distribution phase. I think the next cycle is going to be a true mania top. I think a lot of things are coming together to make that happen. And we can talk about sort of that 16-year cycle idea that I've sort of presented in the past. But I think we are heading over the next couple of years towards a spectacular blow off top that really involves kind of everybody in the space. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be more like that as opposed to a distribution phase. This distribution phase we're seeing here is almost kind of like a precursor maybe to that blow off top idea that we would see in 24, maybe even 25. I don't know.
Yeah, I know we've sort of talked about that a little bit before. And actually, I think that you've even talked about this idea, even I think like a year or two ago when I first had you on my channel, like the idea that one of the future cycles could be, as you call it, right, like left translated.
Yep.
And so your general speculation, right, at this point is that there is a reasonable chance to assume that the next peak could come earlier in the cycle, and be that spectacular sort of blow off top. And you think that there's a good chance that after that we would sort of be at the end of a full 16-year cycle that kind of started like in like 2009.
Right. Yep, exactly. When you look at other asset classes in general, they do have this sort of couple decade cycle, sort of a really long secular cycle. Bitcoin has not gone, and the crypto space as a whole has not really seen any kind of real winter. I mean, we've gone through obviously 85% declines, but those declines typically were over just a 1-year period. And that's not long enough for a long secular cycle of a 16-year or 20-year kind of length cycle. You typically would want to see a 2 to 3 year decline. We saw again something similar in the NASDAQ, where in 2000 it peaked. I mean, .com, internet, it was the greatest invention in 100 years, perhaps, right? The future looked so promising, and we went to a massive blow-off peak, and then it took about 3 years to bottom out. And I think I just don't think this asset class is any different. It's not me being bearish on the technology or the future of this. It's just sort of ebb and flow of markets and cycles. And I think this next 4 year cycle has a decent chance. Of course, it's just a read, right? And just looking at prior cycles and other asset classes and how they behave. But yeah, if we do get a massive blow off top similar to that .com move, or maybe even bigger, then generally when you get a move like that, then you need a longer period of time to consolidate those gains and to bring back sentiment back down. And then you start building for the future where actually people start using the technology, as opposed to kind of think of what we have now, which is more it being based on speculation around the future potential of crypto as a whole.
Okay, so you think, right? So like you think there could be a longer bear market following a future mania phase, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily long-term bearish on crypto. It's just that it's sort of a natural process that it goes through, like the .com bubble.
Right, exactly. Yeah, not at all bearish in the slightest. Of course, very, very bullish on the space. But if we've gone through 85% declines in price and market cap in these asset classes many times before, there's no reason why we wouldn't go and do that again, but this time over just a longer period of time, especially if we hit some crazy heights in the next cycle.
One question I'd have for you, and I remember thinking this when I was watching, I think one of your recent videos is, and I think that's a really interesting idea of having sort of like a longer bear market at some point. Do you think there's any risk of us already being in that? There's already, I mean, there's a ton of people calling for much lower prices. I mean, there always
Hmm.
are, right? Like
Yeah.
every bear market, there's always someone calling for a 99 or 95% drop.
Yep.
I think right now Bitcoin's down about 74, 75% from like its all-time high to its actual low of like 17.5k. But there's certainly no shortage of people calling for much lower prices. Sort of saying, well, this is the first stock market bear market that Bitcoin has really ever experienced, and we're heading into a recession. Do you think there's any risk of us already being in that, or is that not something you're that concerned with?
Well, I'm not concerned about sort of that 2 to 3 year bear market phase I just described, but from a price in the intermediate time frame leading into, say, the holiday period, end of the year, there is certainly risk to the downside where some of those numbers could be hit, like 12 or 13 or even sub 10. I
Right.
just don't think, given its history, its volatility, that you could discount that and that you can just kind of make the assumption that it can't get that low. I just don't think you can say that as a prudent investor. You have to be prepared for that in the bear phase. I don't really care too much about people talking about those low prices. I think that's just the bear market
Mm-hmm.
bias and the bear market influence. Same way those same people, we're talking, super cycle and so on, the top. That's typical at this phase of a bear market. But yeah, I mean, you look at the 3 month consolidation that we've been looking at here in this $20,000 to $30,000 range. One more extension down of just sort of 30 or 40% gets you down to that level. So it's very easy to see how we have one final move down. But again, I just think it's more of a shorter term, short duration decline down to those lows. And I think that's the type of move that would mark the end of the 4 year cycle and the end of this bear market. So yeah, price wise, I can definitely see it. Time, no. I think by the end of the year, we'd be looking at that low. But of course, we are, with institutional involvement and the higher market caps that we've seen, there's obviously a lot of institutional players, a lot of deep-pocketed players in this space. So where general risk assets go over the next 3 or 4 months is going to be very important. I don't think there's a situation where, if inflation continues to rise and is not under control, and the Fed needs to get even more aggressive than what's already been telegraphed, then certainly that's going to pull the markets down even further. And I just don't see a situation where Bitcoin just breaks that correlation. So it will get pulled down with any sort of macro environment that pulls us down. But again, I even think from a risk on, risk off macro perspective, I think we're getting close by the end of the year where the market would be able to see that the Fed is going to stop, and that would be the impetus for the next, or the catalyst for the next cycle to begin.
So, I mean, like, how important would you say time is of a component in these bear markets? Because obviously, like, price drawdown is one thing, going down a certain percentage, whether it's 70% or 80%. At the end of the day, it might not really be that relevant to longer term investors. But I think one of the things is like just the time component of bear markets can really wear people down. Do you see that? Do you see just time being a bigger consideration? And the reason I ask that is because, like, do you see an example where Bitcoin's bottom could already be potentially in, for all we know, but maybe there's still some fear left for us at the end of the year?
Yeah, time for me is mostly what I try and focus on. Price normally, yes, you can decline sharply over a short period of time. Most people kind of get immune to those paper losses. It's really the time element where they're sitting at sort of these unrealized losses for a very long time. They start to see other asset classes maybe rally, and their positions obviously are underwater. It's really that time element that that impacts sentiment, and it's sentiment that drives markets in the end. Sentiment drives behavior, and that to me is the most important thing. So we may have a situation even now, say in Bitcoin, where the lows that we saw, I think in June, they may end up being the actual print, right? The low, but from my study at least, I don't think that 4-year cycle low is in until we get closer to the end of the year, and it'd have to be more of a grinding sideways move where people just sort of really just give up and throw in the towel, and then we can then begin that next move higher. You also need a period of accumulation and reaccumulation. So I think that's really what's underway at the moment, and that just takes time. It takes time to develop. It takes time for sellers to be finally exhausted, and the folks that really don't believe in the space to move on and find the next catchy thing to get on board, and then that's how sort of bear markets come to an end at the end. I just don't think we're really there yet. You look at social media feed, I think even with today's move of a couple of $1,000s, all of a sudden everyone's kind of really somewhat bullish again. Short term, I see a lot of people already calling for an end to that bear market. Hey, they may be right, I don't know, but you don't see that much short-term quick euphoria if the bear market's already over, typically at least. So I think we need more time. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So it's more like the bottom will occur when most people aren't calling for it to have occurred, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not calling for it, and they've just given up. And I just don't think everybody's necessarily just given up yet. There's still a little too much hope left in the market for this to end. And it really has only been, it's been a 9-month decline. Like you said, 75%. It feels like we're a little short of that end.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with you there. It seems like there could be something else at the end of the year. So for a general bottom, I know you mentioned the end of the year. Are you thinking like November, December, plus or minus like 1 or 2 months on either side, just to give you a window, or are you more focused on a specific month specifically, or?
Well, so on the shorter time frame, on the 60-day cycle time frame, you need to see a bottom at the 60-day time frame to correspond with the 4-year cycle low. It just looks like we just ended one 2 days ago or a day ago with this move today. The next 60-day cycle was out into early to mid-November. I think that is the real opportunity for a bear market low around that time frame. So around about that mid-November time frame, but that could also easily extend out another 60 days into January time frame. That would be pretty close to that sort of 4-year low mark. So somewhere between November and January, perhaps, is a sort of good range for a possible low. Now, again, that low could be in from a price standpoint. We sort of double bottomed. We found support the other day on this 60-day cycle low. So it's possible when you look back in maybe a year that it looks as if that's where the lows were formed. But I think what you'd end up seeing is in November or January, a retest again, a third time of that area if the lows are already in, and then you'd see it move on. And that's where the bear market end would be, in my opinion.
One of the things I heard you talk about, and this was way back, I mean, this was maybe even before I started a YouTube channel, actually. I think you remember you talking about, in every cycle you have to consider, certain possibilities like a double top, for instance, like, where you go up to the prior all-time high from the prior cycle, but you don't necessarily exceed that. And I think we've kind of seen that happen with gold, right? I mean, I'm not that into gold, but if you look at the chart, it kind of seems like that's happened before.
Yep.
One of the things that I'm wondering about is, and you said this yourself earlier, is that we sort of all expected diminishing returns. I don't think a lot of people were expecting it to be as diminished as it was, right? Let's only go to 69K. Right. Do you see any big risks of us really struggling to break through those prior highs? Because I mean, this was really the first time that Bitcoin had put in a double top. Into its actual bull market, like once it passed 20K and then it went up to a double top. Do you think because we spent so much time, like at 60K, throughout, January, February, March, April, and then in October and November. Do you think that's going to cause some issues for us in the next bull market, or what do you think about that?
I think it's going to provide obviously some significant resistance. The problem is if we don't break through that level in the next 4-year cycle, and that becomes the cap, we can't get a blow off top. And I just feel, and it's maybe it's a bias I have, but I just feel with an emerging technology like this and the adoption that it's seeing and the global nature of this, that it sort of deserves to have one. And I'm not sure how sort of cemented that thought process is, but I just feel as if that the next cycle needs to be that, or will be something like that. And for that reason, I think we will get through that prior cycle high level and go off to a big top. But yes, to your opening point there, when I first created the first video back in 2018 on the next cycle, I made it very clear that this is just, my view on where this cycle would peak is just purely based on the prior cycles. I'm just using cycles as a way to form possibilities on where the next cycle might go. But I made it very clear that we may not even, get above that $20,000 peak. And that was something that people getting into the space need to be prepared for, and to have a plan for something like that, because there's no guarantee on what the next cycle would look like. And that's why it's more important to really accumulate as best as you can responsibly at the right time of a cycle, and begin to unwind a lot of that position as best as possible. And it's not about timing absolute bottoms or predicting absolute tops. Yeah, it would have been great if we had a $150,000 move into this 4-year cycle peak. It would have been very easy to unwind and sell a lot of the positions and really walk away, really taking a real advantage of the cycle. But it didn't happen. That's why it's just best to have to understand where we stand in the cycle and just accumulate responsibly. I've been saying to a lot of people, sort of in my service, that you should never be selling under 30,000, and you should be accumulating under 20,000. And if it goes to 12, then be happy. It's okay, right? Because you have that long-term view, but do it responsibly and make sure it's an allocation that is not too big, where you're not going to be able to sleep well at night. And then if you do get a move down to say 12,000 at the end of the bear market, you're not going to be selling that in panic. You have a view of the long term. So yeah, any path forward in the next cycle is possible. We need to accept that. And in the end, it's really your timing and your position sizing and how disciplined you are in that approach that's gonna set you apart from a lot of other people.
So mapping out a theoretical, path, right? I mean, suppose we did have sort of a bottom at the end of the year, and we ended up getting a left translated peak for the next cycle. When would it need to occur to be left translated? Would it need to occur sort of like the end of 23 or beginning of 24 timeframe for it to be left translated?
So technically, left translated just means anywhere sort of left of the midpoint of the cycle, so the 2-year mark. So okay. Then you'd be looking at the end of 24 for that peak to occur.
Okay.
Anything left of that is left translated, of course. But it could form around the middle of that cycle as well. So you only have a 2-year decline. 2 years for an asset class like this is maybe all that you need. And Bitcoin can cause a lot of damage in 2 years. 2 years of declines may be enough sentiment-wise to satisfy kind of that secular bear market decline that we may be looking for, as opposed to these cyclical bear market declines that we've seen over the last 3-4 year cycles.
Do you put any weight to the idea if the peak were considered to be April of 2021, then the bear market has already been going on for a year and a half at this point, potentially? Like, is that, or do you sort of only measure the bear market from the November top?
Well, I'm measuring it from the November top, but as we discussed earlier, yes, it certainly was a distribution phase that you could argue that the bear market is 15, 18 months in now. I'm not sure if that changes a whole lot necessarily. I don't think a lot of the sentiment bleeding didn't occur until really we peaked back in November.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know if it really matters a whole lot. It's still a right translated cycle. We still made a higher high to the prior cycle before that.
Sure. I mean, these are really interesting things because, one of the things you said about the next cycle, if it's left translated, is, if the peak were to occur in 2024, let's say like, either right after the halving or a few months after the halving, I have to imagine there's going to be a lot of people thinking that 2025 is going to be a bull market. But
Yep.
you're saying there exists a situation where by the time a lot of people think the bull market is about to begin, it's already over.
Right. Right, and that's almost like a perfect setup for that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you have a situation where if you're in this sort of blow off phase, and you've already gone multiples higher from these lows, and the halving is still ahead, or the halving is only happening, you can just already imagine the the narratives that will form, the super cycle narratives,
right,
around the fact that we're already at six figures, and and the halving is only just happening, and the inflation rate is being halved, and so on and so on. And then you start talking about $1 million Bitcoin and $1.5 million Bitcoin. It really would fuel that blow off move. So I have this sneaking suspicion that maybe we get started earlier again. This last 4-year cycle really did start early as well. But maybe you get up there very quickly and start that process sooner and really lay the trap for a really phenomenal top. Earlier in the cycle than normal. And I actually do think the whole halving narrative gets broken in this next cycle. I do believe that. I've never really been a proponent of the halving driving price that way, even though I talk about 4-year cycles. It's not 4-year cycles based on the halving,
Right.
So I think this next 4-year cycle is going to prove that the halving doesn't necessarily. It's baked in. It's baked into the whole equation, the whole proposition of Bitcoin. It's not the act of the halving itself that necessarily makes any difference to price.
Would you say that that like access to cheap liquidity, like the Fed going through a phase of QE, is more important than the halving for?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, because that drives willingness. It drives demand and access to capital and people. Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting because. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say it's interesting because up until this point, it seems like they've always aligned. Like we've just been in a long phase of QE.
Right. Exactly, and that's helped, and that's been a tailwind for Bitcoin the entire time. But also, I'm not so into the mining aspect of Bitcoin, but my understanding, at least, is that the mix of miners has really changed. A lot of it's onshoring, a lot of it's U.S. based, and a lot of these folks aren't as keen. A lot of their proposition is to raise debt to fund operations and then stack Bitcoin. So they're hodlers more than I guess miners were in the past. So that I think that takes a lot more away from the argument that even a halving is going to be a lot more bullish for the price when these folks are already holding anyway.
Right. I almost think to some degree, going off your idea of the left translated cycle, that we almost got a glimpse of that this cycle with the peak coming in early 2021, and I mean it's sort of I see what you're saying, right? Like it could just be that we're kind of setting up for it, and it could be a brutal year for that, if we end up going into something like that, and these are certainly points worth considering. I think as we sort of gear up for the next cycle. Do you?
Yeah, wasn't some of your work? I haven't and. Admittedly, I haven't seen some of your work for a little while, but I do recall you were talking about, I think at one point, 23 and 24, right? For sort of a big peak.
Yeah. So the models that I have, certainly I will admit, the path to getting there is not what I thought it was going to be.
It never is easy to.
Yeah.
The path is always, it will take its own path no matter what in the end.
In 2019, I remember making a lot of videos saying that it would take until early 2022 to get to like a sustainable 20K, where like we could actually sustain a 20K price. And then I really regretted all of those words throughout all of 2021. Because we just spent like, the entire year well above 20K. And then now we find ourselves again back at 20K.
Right.
But certainly when I sort of first mapped it out, I thought it would sort of slowly go up over the course of several years, not have this like absolute rocket up to 64K. And then at the beginning of this year, it became very apparent to me that we were going into we were sort of setting up for eventually going into a new cycle.
Hmm.
Because all the metrics that you would use to measure the cycles, they're either all reset already or they're in the process of resetting. Um, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the models that I used over the years always sort of pointed towards 2023 as being the time frame that Bitcoin would hit six figures. Now, I think 2023 is probably too soon. Like, I think
Yeah.
it probably more likely would be 2024
Right.
than 2023. Maybe even 2025. I don't know. But I do hope we get there, even though it won't be the path that I thought we were going to take to get there.
Yeah, I mean, if we get another 4-year cycle that looks very similar to these prior 3 cycles, then that's really the time frame. 2025 would be where that would peak. So that would make also sense. I mean, that would throw away my kind of left translated idea, of course, but that if this mimics the prior 3 cycles, and that's what you're looking at, a 2025 peak in the next 4-year cycle, which, hey, I'm hopefully, I mean, it's still be invested and exposed to that situation. And that's where it becomes a matter of how well you can kind of time or trade the market, even over a long time frame. You can have a view on the market, but at the same time, you have to be flexible enough to stay in it, but also flexible enough to identify as quick as possible to possibly get out as well. So it's not going to be easy when you've got these pretty wildly different kind of scenarios or possibilities in the market. You have to try to find an equilibrium in that and not be too married to any one possible outcome and be open to those outcomes as much as possible.
The general narrative in the last cycle was that Bitcoin would go to six figures, like the
Yep.
100 to 200K range, I think is what most people thought. I think a few people thought it would go higher, but a lot of people, there was a general consensus that, we would eventually hit six figures. Do you see those predictions just being shifted by a cycle, or do you think that we're getting too focused on actual like price predictions, and we should more so focus on like other things like the timing of the cycle rather than the exact price that it goes to?
Yeah, I think we just got a little ahead of ourselves in general, looking at past behavior of these cycles and looking at our own portfolios and our own dreams of what that would mean if it gets up to that level. And we kind of just ignored a lot of the data that was there. Even, I would admittedly say when we started moving up in November, right? It was at the 34-month point. It was right at the 3-year mark. So, I already knew that was getting kind of late in the cycle, but I kind of convinced myself saying, well, there's no reason why we can't get an extremely right translated cycle. There's no reason why this can't peak at month 37 or month 38 and move forward. And that still would have been reasonable looking back, but it really wasn't a high probability event. And, it wasn't until Bitcoin came back and lost the 10-month moving average sort of a second time there. At that point, it was already at 42, right? And that's where I said, okay, that's it. It's peaked, but a little bit of bias in there. So I think we all carry a lot of bias. I think we just need to kind of remove a lot of that and remove a lot of what we think we know that price must do. There's just too many variables in the end, and it's too easy to stitch together a couple of different data points and form, a story and a narrative, and then a thesis that we get so married to that we really can't shake off. So I think we just want to try and be as flexible as possible, and the best way to do that is, obviously, buy low and sell high.
Yeah.
And I think we're at that point right now, where you just, if you start buying and accumulating at these lower ranges, you're going to be okay if you can hold through and see it through.
Right. Yeah, I think these markets certainly have a way of humbling
Yeah,
all of us
of course.
eventually. Um, one thing I've noticed is that sort of one narrative takes over for a while, for a few months, and then there's just like a shift to a new one, and it's constantly
Right.
shifting narratives. And honestly, it seems like it's always good to sort of fade whatever the most recent narrative is. But I actually wanted to ask you kind of a completely different question. And I know very active in sort of like the precious metal charts as well. And
Oh,
just
please don't remind me.
well, just as I mean, so for me, to be completely honest, I mean, like I'm
Yeah.
much more interested in crypto. I'm much more interested in Bitcoin than gold and silver. But I also can't help myself from looking back at periods where gold and silver did very well.
Yeah.
Even like maybe before I was even born, or like a decade or two ago. And I wondered to myself, like, oh, is something like that? Could something like that happen again? Do you
Well,
did you have any sort of like thoughts in precious metals for this decade? Like, do you think they'll do somewhat well? Do you think they won't? What are your
well, I've
thoughts?
been positioned for them to do well, and I think the backdrop is there for them to do very well, and they just haven't, and they're not moving.
Right.
So it's been a little discouraging. It's at a very precarious position right here, where if it loses its recent support around that, I think it's around 1680 level, that it could fall pretty quickly. A lot of this is dollar driven, of course, but yeah, the narrative is there for a solid, run for precious metals. Whether you're talking about, some of the geopolitical fears out there, or inflation, government authoritarian rule. There's plenty of reasons why I think gold should move higher, but it just hasn't made that move yet. But I'm certainly bullish on it,
Hmm.
and as long as it can remain above recent levels of support, I think it can do really well. But it's something I don't want to get too tied to, because I do have a tendency to be a little more biased towards, because it's something I've been trading for 25 years or so.
Right.
So I have an affinity to it. I do hold quite a bit of bullion as well. But yeah, I think the story is there, the narrative is there for it to move significantly higher over the next few years. But short term, it's struggling for sure.
Yeah, because I sort of going into 2022 when I realized in Q1 that like cash was going to be king, this year. I
Yep.
was like,
Yep.
I want to hedge some way, and I thought precious metals could be a good way to hedge. And I mean, they haven't done like they're not down as much as crypto, right? I mean,
Right.
they're not nearly down as much as crypto, but they've lost. I mean, they certainly have lost value this year. So hopefully we'll see something come of that. I do sometimes wonder if like if in 20 years I'm gonna sort of be the same way about Bitcoin, like just constantly talk, like thinking it's gonna do something, but then maybe there's something new out there that's more attractive. Maybe I'm already like that. Maybe
Yeah,
I've already like
I
that.
think in 20 years there will be something similar. I did a tweet this morning just on that very subject about kids being born today in 20 or 30 years, teasing the Bitcoin maxis and calling it a relic, because that's really what Bitcoin's positioned right now to be, which is superior gold, and that's the consensus, and that's how they want to position it. So I think it will reach a level where it flattens out, just like gold has done, and just over time it'll go over short periods of growth, and get back to sort of an inflation rate. And I think Bitcoin would be something similar
Right.
to what gold has been, and that's fine. That's really what it's designed to be, I guess. Right? Once you reach a
Right.
fair value, wherever that number is, um, I think Bitcoin will serve that purpose.
I almost feel like the sentiment is already heading in that direction
It
because
is. Yes, I can
I
see it.
never even considered myself a Bitcoin maxi. Like I've held a lot of Ethereum through the bull market. I held a lot of altcoins through the bull market. I'm pretty light on everything right now except for like Bitcoin and cash, when it comes to
Yep.
like crypto. But I already even feel that sentiment of like, like I'm just too married to the to Bitcoin, but that, everything else is gonna overtake it. And it's one of those things where I even told myself a few years ago, like I don't want to become, like that person, like
Right.
like the person that gets so attached to something that they're not willing to admit that the world is changing, right, or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
So I've been a very big proponent of the dominance going up, and I actually still hope it does because it would help my it would help my portfolio a lot. But after it does, I'm not sure that I'm gonna have to. I'm not sure that I can, or assuming it does, it might not even do it again. I don't know. But I might have to force myself to become more flexible with potentially changing market conditions.
Right. It's becoming the stable coin of sort of crypto. And you see a lot of charts posted now and everyone talking about it, altcoin performance versus Bitcoin and not versus USD anymore. So it's certainly getting to that level. And there's also, I think, a lot more of sort of this sort of almost religious-like, appeal to Bitcoin. And you see that more so in the last couple of years.
Right.
So it's definitely getting to that level.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. I mean, I think the next market cycle, I'm sure, is going to be full of all sorts of narratives. I mean, Ethereum's about to transition to proof of stake here relatively shortly, and we'll see. We'll see what comes from that.
That's going to be interesting to see how the market responds to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty bullish on Ethereum. I know you are as well.
Yeah.
I think everything's set up narrative-wise for Ethereum to have a pretty big cycle in the next bull market. I think the move to proof of stake is going to help that from sort of the environmental perspective. And there'll be an attack on Bitcoin for its supposed waste on energy. So I think Ethereum's going to do very well. I'm not sure about all the rest of it. I know you're still pretty big on ADA and
I would say, I would say I'm never really big on any altcoins. I'm mainly just it's mainly Bitcoin and ETH, but I recognize the potential of these altcoins in bull markets, and that's why I loaded up on ADA for the last one. I'm sure I will load up on some of these altcoins when I feel like the time is right, just because they can give outsized returns compared to the blue chips. But it's always hard to know which ones. Like you sometimes when you look back, it always seems like it's obvious, but some of the altcoins, to some degree, there's some survivorship bias, right? Because there's a lot of altcoins that you might have bought in the bear market. They don't do anything in the bull market, and you sort of just look at the ones that did do well and say, oh, well, if I'd bought it 12 months ago, it would be up 100x or something.
Right. Or we look at it versus USD again and say, oh, wow, that's great. But then put them side by Bitcoin, they've kind of stayed flat the whole time. And it's like, well, why did I have that risk exposure when I could have just sat in Bitcoin and done just as well?
Right.
Sure, certainly. Yeah. How do you find those altcoins? I guess you need to get into those discords and find what's, what people are talking about more than anything else, because we know most of these projects don't end up really becoming anything, at least not in the first real cycle of them coming aboard.
Right.
It's really what how well these projects can get a community behind them, and that's really what drives a lot of these coins. It seems like. I know I'm too old to get too deep into some of these communities to find out what the next gem is.
I think every cycle, I become less and less interested in altcoins. Not because I don't think, I still have them, but I've seen myself make a lot of money and then lose a lot of money on them multiple times,
Right.
So you sort of just become immune, or you just don't even want to deal with the stress of it sometimes,
Right.
Maybe the last question is, we're just to sort of wrap it up on ETH, because we do have the merge coming up here in a little bit, and I'm very bullish on Ethereum. I don't really think it has much competition. I really don't. I think it's just miles ahead of the other layer ones. But in the short term, I'm still not convinced that it's going to avoid something similar to what might happen with Bitcoin at the end of the year, right? If Bitcoin has a correction or a final capitulation, let's say to 14K or 12K or 10K or wherever it might be, I do think there's a good chance that Ethereum could see a drop just as much, if not more, than what Bitcoin would see. And one of the things that is causing me some concern and is sort of like the Bitcoin dominance being at a low, the Ethereum dominance being at near historic highs. Do you sort of see anything on the Ether Bitcoin pair? Obviously, there's been a lot of hype around it recently, and it's up a lot. And I think I even saw one of your tweets where you thought that Ether Bitcoin over the macro scale could continue to go up, and I would actually generally agree with that statement. What do you sort of think, though, as we go into the end of the year? Do you have any strong convictions on how ETH is going to perform?
I think if the Bitcoin lows are still ahead of us towards the end of the year, that everything gets dragged down with it. There's no way it's going to completely decouple. It can still maintain some relative strength, but yeah, I just don't see a situation where Bitcoin drops into that low and Ethereum is going in the other direction. It's going to, I think, also be impacted significantly. I do like the fact that the pair, as is at this sort of bull market highs, and typically at this phase of the bear market, so 9 months in, typically all the altcoins as they are right now, but and Ethereum as well would be towards the bottom of that range on the pair, and it's at the top of the range. So that's bullish for the next cycle, and I think that's really telling us that's going to be one of the fast horses in the next cycle. That's really what it's telling us. But it's too early to sort of jump on board. I mean, the move has happened as far as I'm concerned for now. Yeah. When you look at that pair, it's a significant outsized move, and even USD, it's well more than doubled of those lows. So I just think it's a bear market rally for now. I think it will come back, but whether it tests those lows again or exceeds them, I don't know. But what I do know is the beta on Ethereum to Bitcoin is pretty high, right. And Ethereum has done some absolutely crazy moves in either direction. So if your thesis or your plan doesn't allow for some pretty crazy moves to the downside on Ethereum into those bear market lows, then you can be in trouble. So it's an opportunity as well if we can get down to that level.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember because when it happens, assuming it happens, no one wants to really buy it at that point. But
no, they want to buy it now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But just a reminder to everyone, right? Like if Bitcoin has that capitulation, like this is what we've sort of been building towards, right? And it would rhyme. It would rhyme incredibly well with the last two bear markets.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, we kind of sit 70% down for a few months, and then we have the final drop, and then that's it.
Right.
Bob, it's been a pleasure having you on. I mean, I think we should try to do this again. Maybe sometime early next year. When it hopefully the bottom is more.
Maybe end of the year we can have a bear markets in party or something like that.
Yeah. I'd love to have you back on the show. If you guys are not subscribed to Bob, make sure you subscribe again. You can find all the links to his socials down in the description below, also in the pinned comment. Bob, once again, a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to having you in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Great talking to you.